Welcome to the amazing world. Today, today we will learn about the outbreak after the call of the Estates General and the end to absolute monarchy in France. While the people of France were being enlightened, King Louis XVI called on the Estates General, a legislative body. Though we know France followed absolute monarchy, but the monarch could not decide on increasing taxes to the state. Such a meeting was called last in 1614. On 5th May 1789, King Louis XVI called for a meeting to pass a proposal for new taxation to deal with the financial crisis. This meeting was where the legislative body, each estate, had one vote by order. The clergy, the representation of the clergy was 300, of the nobility 300, while that of the commoners was 600, but it did not represent the poor, peasants, artisans, and women. To understand further how this representation worked and what led to the outbreak of the revolution was that the clergy had one vote, the nobility one vote, the commoners, those 600, had one vote, while there were the peasants and artisans who could not vote, and so they demanded that there should be voting by head, and this resulted in the outbreak of the revolution. The revolution broke out because during this estates general meeting, the first and the second estate were ready to vote to increase taxation on the third estate, who was undergoing lot of trouble at this time. They decided that it is to vote by order, and they did not want to vote by head as demanded by the third estate. This angered the third estate, who believed in equality in law and equality opportunities for all, and had proposed a much fairer system of voting. They were much angry when King Louis XVI rejected it. This anger brought them to believe that their rights were being violated. As a result, they marched out and formed a National Assembly on 13th June 1789. That was the day they marched out. After they marched out on 13th June 1789, the first time this assembly met was on 20th June at an indoor tennis court at Versailles. When they met here, they had the support of the clergy as well as the nobility. So there were few members from the clergy and nobility who also opposed the feudal privileges. We have clergy, Abbé and Maribor, who opposed feudal privileges. The aim of the National Assembly was to limit the powers of the monarch and abolish the feudal system. With this, the turmoil in France was increasing. Subsistence crisis, people struggling to get their daily meal, and at such a time when the assembly also did not work, the estates general did not work, the king now ordered troops to be moved into France. This further angered the people of France, and so on 14 July 1789, the angry people stormed and destroyed Bastille, that stood for the despotic power of the king. This did not remain just within the city limits now. It went beyond to the countryside, where the peasants took hoes and pitchforks and started to take revenge on the estates of landlords and on castles of noblemen. They burnt and looted them. They attacked the crops. As a result, on 4th August 1789, King Louis XVI recognized the National Assembly. It was after this that the National Assembly started preparing for the Constitution. Now, what were the features of this Constitution was it tried to make France a constitutional monarch, where the powers of the king would be limited. Secondly, it abolished feudalism. Thirdly, the clergy were forced to give up their privileges. They confiscated land and abolished tithes. Separation of power was introduced, the legislative, executive, and the judiciary. The members of the National Constituent Assembly were to be chosen through indirect election. To understand what is this indirect election, let me explain to you. There were two types of citizens. There were active citizens and passive citizens. Now, who were these active citizens? Were only men above the age of 25 and who paid taxes equal to 3 days' wages of a laborer, and who could qualify as an elector and become a member of the assembly. They all belonged to the highest bracket of taxpayers, while a large majority of men and all women were called the passive citizens. Now, if you look here, you will notice that the active citizens voted for the electorate and the electorate voted in turn for the National Assembly. And this National Assembly would now select the ministers. But this king had a veto power. That means he could vote when he wanted against a will, against a law. This features further that the Estates General was renamed as the National Constituent Assembly. The next thing was that this drafting of the Constitution was completed almost by August end 1791. The Constitution began with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. What is the Declaration, the right of man and citizen? What are the main features of this declaration? Was that it reflected the revolutionary ideas of Enlightenment and American Declaration of Independence. The features were all men are born free and equal in rights. So they got the right of life, liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. They were guaranteed the freedom of speech, religion, and equality before law. The fundamental source of all sovereignty resided in the nation. And lastly, the main slogan of liberty, equality and fraternity was seen. But remember, it's noteworthy to note that all women did not get these rights. See you in the next video. Thank you.